Welcome to another episode of the Victory Podcast, driven by Audi. I'm your host, Keely Eure, joined by my co-host and former USC quarterback, Cody Kessler. Cody, we are back for our first episode of 2025. Excited to get back to it. We have a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of news around USC football, so excited to dive into it. And also thankful, Cody. I know you've been in the trenches as a dad, so very excited to have you back on the pod.
Yeah, we announced last episode, obviously, before we took a little bit of a break that my son was born. He is now a month and a half. So it's been a wild ride, but I'm loving every second of it. My wife has been the real MVP. She's been absolutely amazing. We make a good team here, though, in the Kessler household. My dog, Coda, has been great, too, for those late sleepless nights for my son, Brooks. He's right there by our side, whoever's up with them, and kind of just being a good companion with all of that. But no, it's been a blast. I'm loving it. There are some tough nights. I guess some nights are tougher than others. Some days are tougher than others. And we're first time parents. So we're kind of learning on the fly here, but we are loving every second of it. And I'm having an absolute blast. But it is good to be back, talk some USC football, though. I've tried to check out a little bit, and be present at home, which I have been. My eyes are kind of teetering a little bit, looking at my phone, seeing who we're hiring, who's coming in, who's going out, all these different things with USC football, because it's such an exciting time in the offseason with the hiring cycle for coaches, with the transfer portal, all the new players coming in. So got a lot to talk about this episode. But yeah, like I said, it's been the biggest blessing of our lives being able to be first time parents, and we're loving every second of it. But I am excited to do this episode and talk a little USC football today.
Yes, a lot of news to talk about. Very excited to dive into this one, Cody. Before we do, just a couple of reminders. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you ever want to get your voice heard, be sure to look out for a tweet or a question box, either on Twitter or Instagram. Our socials are Victory Pod USC. You can also send us a text. That's not time dependent. You can send us a text 24/7 if you wanted to. It's in the audio description of each episode. If you click on the link, it'll open up your messaging app, and that's how you can text us. And just be sure to include your name because it doesn't automatically do so. Alrighty, Cody, let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this episode. First thing I want to talk about is defensive coordinator D'Anton Lynn. He received a contract extension on January 16th, or at least that's when it was announced. And I'm not going to lie, the first thing I thought of when I heard the news was the ending of every show we've done towards the end of the season. Cody, you were like, priority number one, make sure that man does not leave. So I thought that you might be very happy about this news.
Yeah, I was thrilled when I found out we were able to keep D'Anton Lynn as USC's defensive coordinator. This is huge news for USC football. Probably the most important news so far this offseason. And I know we've got a long way to go until season next year, but this is a huge step in the right direction for this USC football team. Now, I know I'm probably like a lot of other Trojan fans that were getting a little nervous when it came to this hiring cycle for coaches around the country, because we knew that D'Anton Lynn was going to be a hot commodity, and he probably will be
Yeah.
for the rest of his career as a coach. And I'm going to speak. I'm going to enjoy the time that we have him, because who knows how long that'll be. Because I think he's going to make a great head coach one day. But that's for another episode. But
It's a double-edged
um,
sword of having
yeah,
talented coaches.
100%, especially when you're at a blue blood place like USC, right? Coaches want to
Yeah.
come pull from those places and take, coaches that are position coaches, coordinators, to become their head coaches at other universities. But again, I'm not going to lie. I was getting a little nervous. I saw, and I'm sure a lot of, or everyone else did as well, saw some news out of Penn State that their defensive coordinator, Tom Allen, had left to go to Clemson. There was a void to be filled there. Writing on the wall, or probably the most, the name that
It
made the
made
most sense
sense.
was
Yeah.
Dan Lynn, who went to Penn State, who played football there. So I was getting a little nervous, and I tried to tell myself not to read Twitter. Don't believe everything you see online. I fell a little victim to seeing some of these rumors flying around, starting to believe them a little bit. But I was, like I said, I was beyond thrilled, and I took a big sigh of relief, took a deep breath when I saw that we extended D'Anton Lynn and that he was going to be a Trojan for next year and for the foreseeable future.
Now it's interesting too, and we don't have like verifiable proof here on the podcast that Lynn was offered something by Penn State, but like you said, Cody, the writing was on the wall. It made a ton of sense. So the fact that Penn State ultimately ended up getting Jim Knowles from Ohio State,
Yeah.
the national championship winner, you get their DC, like they weren't messing around. And apparently, according to reports, Knowles is now the highest paid DC in college football history. So it sounded like Penn State was not messing around. They packed a punch in their offer. So if that's the case of what we assumed happened, it's even bigger that USC was able to keep Lynn, because you got to imagine that must have been an enticing offer for Lynn.
Yeah, hey, I love it. Knowles, that's the perfect hire for Penn State. You guys made the great choice. I love it. Keep him as long as you want to keep him. We're going to keep D'Anton Lynn over here. He's very comfortable in this warm weather over here in Southern California. But no, I mean, from a football aspect of it, for me, I wrote down a couple reasons, and kind of going back throughout the season, watching some of the tape, why it's so important to keep D'Anton Lynn. And the first one for me is saw huge improvement in multiple areas on the defensive side of the football that we were desperately wanting to see, right? Going
Yeah.
forward under Lincoln Riley. The offense has always been there and took a little bit of a step back this year, and that was expected playing in the Big Ten. You're playing some tough defenses. Now we've got to get on the same page and play better complementary football, but we needed the defense to be better from where they'd been the last couple of years under Lincoln Riley, and they did just that. And going back and looking at some of the stats, scoring defense. This is probably one of the biggest ones for me. We were giving up 34 points per game in 2023. In 2024, we only gave up 24 points per game. That is a difference of 10 points. It doesn't sound like a crazy stat or 10 points. Okay, not a huge deal, but think about it. We had to score at least 35 points to win games in 2023 based off of what our defense was giving up last year.
Yeah.
24 is a lot more doable, right? That takes us from
Totally.
121st in college football all the way to 56th in college football. We also saw improvements in total defense, giving up 432 yards per game. A year ago, this past season, we only gave up 377. That's 119th to 77th. Another area, and I think one of the biggest, or I guess these next two categories for me, which really sold me on D'Anton Lynn staying here at USC because of the conference we're playing in, because of what it takes to win national championships, what it takes to win conference titles was rushing defense and third down defense. We saw a dramatic jump in both. In 2023, we were 119th out of 130 teams in college football, giving up 186 yards per game. Last year, we were 53rd in the country. That is a tremendous jump. Third down defense, another area. I think this is probably one of the biggest jumps of any team in college football. We were giving up a 43% conversion rate for opposing offenses, which was 109th in the country. Last year, we were giving up only a 33% conversion rate, which is 21st in college football. That is a huge jump. And third down is the money down, right? That's what we talk about on
Yeah.
offense, on defense. Those are got to have it situations. Now, I understand that it wasn't perfect and there's areas to improve on. And that's going to come with obviously coaching and scheme and getting comfortable with all of that, but also with personnel and having the right players on the field to fit that scheme. And I think it works hand in hand. But areas that we do need to improve on. And I'd love to talk about all the positives here, but we've got to be honest. And I know Coach Lynn is in the staff meetings talk about this as well. And I added in some stats from other teams in our conference and also the national championship winning football team, Ohio State, and why it's important. But one area for me, and it starts really with the front seven tackles for loss, right? We only had 53 this year. That was 120th in college football. Ohio State was fifth. They did a great job of creating havoc in the backfield. Another area that we talked about all season, sacks. We only had 21 on the season. That's 92nd in college football. Ohio State was second. Penn State was fifth in the country. And then on fourth down conversion or fourth down defense, we've got to be better of getting off the field. We were great on third down, just fourth down, we struggled a little bit. Our opponents had a 57% conversion rate, which is 91st in all of college football. We've got to be better there. We've got to be able to get off the field. And Keely, we talked about this year so much in these close football games where you've got to find a way to win at the end. When it comes down, I flash back to Maryland, to Penn State, 2 fourth downs on that drives where we
Yeah.
had chances to win. We've got to be able to get a stop and get off the field. And fourth down's a big area of that. And then the last one I'll add in that needs to improve is passing defense, right? We were 103rd in 2023. We only jumped up to 98th in the country last season. So there is some good and bad with that. But why it's so important keeping him is because you can build off of that. But anyone that watched the film, anyone that put the tape on from a year ago or watched 2023 defense to the 2024 defense, I guarantee you, whether you're a former football player, whether you spent your life playing football, whether you just watch the game for fun and you're a fan, you can absolutely see a defense that was flying around, that was communicating well, that took a huge step forward, that was getting lined up in the right spot
Yeah.
continuously, that had obnoxious communication like D'Anton Lynn always preaches. So that was great to see. And you saw a lot of players that trusted the guys around them and also trusted their coaching staff and trusted the scheme.
What's interesting too about the stats that you just mentioned is that it doesn't even really account for multiple factors that does play a role in what you see on the field. Like, for example, 2023 was the second year of that scheme versus 2024 was the first year of that scheme, or a new conference facing opponents you've never faced before. Like, it's a credit to Lynn and his teaching that the players were able to feel comfortable and confident in this scheme, that not only did they play in a new conference, but they improved on what they did in 2023. So overall, I feel like you can't quantify that, but it's even more impressive when you really break it down in that sense, Cody.
Yeah, it's been very impressive what D'Anton Lynn's been able to do. And this is only his second year as a defensive coordinator, too. It's not like he's a coach with 20, 30, 40 years of experience, right? He
Yeah.
had a huge turnaround at UCLA his first year as a defensive coordinator a couple of years ago. And then last season at USC, we saw a huge improvement in multiple areas like we just talked about. Now, is it perfect? No. Can it get better? Yes, absolutely. But what he's been able to do in such a short amount of time is very impressive. And like you mentioned, going from the Pac 12 to the Big Ten, not only that, you have an entirely new roster from year to year, especially the turnaround and the transfer portal when you have these veterans leave or you have new faces coming in. You have younger guys having to play. You have some guys that have been here that obviously have never played in the scheme before to be able to learn in the spring, learn in the fall, and then go out and have the success that we've had, especially when it comes down to the fundamentals. Like I said, lining up in the right spot, obnoxious communication, not a lot of missed assignments, right? We were very fundamentally sound when it came to tackling, too. That was great improvement from a year ago. Can it be better? Sure. But you can definitely see things moving in the right direction. And that's great to see because that's only his first year at USC or his first year here at USC. I can't wait to see what he can do when he starts building that consistency and continuity with this roster and some of the guys that have been here.
And I'm also just curious from your perspective, Cody, as a player, it has to be nice to know that your coordinator's coming back because USC always talks about building towards being a national championship program once again. And imagining the worst case scenario, it's hard to imagine that USC is taking a step forward if they had to start all over with the DC search, installing a new scheme, installing a new culture all over again. It just seems like that would just be a nightmare in that regard.
Yeah, and you know me, I always like to be optimistic. I try to avoid, hitting the panic button. I try to avoid, the whole sky is falling narrative and freaking out. But if we would have lost D'Anton Lynn, this probably would have been one of the first times on this podcast in the last 3 years that I would have legit hit the panic button. I would have felt like this was a sky is falling situation. And that's just me being honest. It would have probably been the single worst thing that could have happened to USC this offseason. I know we've lost some great coaches on this staff already. I know we've lost some great players in the transfer portal. That's fine. We can build off of that. We can find, some new players to come in and fill those voids, some position coaches that we'll talk about in a little bit. But like you mentioned, when you lose a coordinator, when you have the foundation put in place that Dan Lynn already has, and then you rip it out from underneath these players and this staff and really this university, it's so tough to start back from square one and build it up again. And like you
Mhm.
mentioned, just the search alone is so difficult. Going and finding out and trying to get someone, getting a defense coordinator be someone else hires them, or getting the right guy that's going to fit here, and maybe the guy you want is not available. It's just so difficult. So that's why I said at the beginning of this topic, this was the single most important thing that USC is going to do this offseason because now we can build off of what D'Anton Lynn has already done here in year one, especially in a conference like the Big Ten. Defense wins championships. I'm a former quarterback, and I truly believe defense wins championships. It just would have been so difficult, to recruit, to attract players, to retain the players that are already here when you have three coordinators in 3 years, right? Players want consistency. Players want that continuity that we talk about. They want stability. I know it's kind of, I guess, cliche to say in today's era of the transfer portal and
Sure.
NIL and guys that are hopping in the portal that are only here for about 6 or 7 months. But when it comes to a high school player being recruited, when it comes to a parent talking to coaches about how are you going to develop my player, because you don't go to a school thinking, I mean, some guys probably do, and you'd like to think they don't, but you don't go to a school thinking, all right, I'm only here for a couple months, then I'm out. You'd like to think,
Yeah.
hey, I found my home. This is where I want to be. If something happens, I don't play. I know NIL plays a factor, but something else happens, yeah, I'll go elsewhere. But you don't go to a school with those intentions already. You go to a school thinking, what coaches are there? Is there consistency? Is there a coach that I want to play for? How are they going to help develop me and get to that next level? And D'Anton Lynn fits all of those categories. And I think he's one of the best in the country, especially with how young he is and how, you know, not a ton of experience that he has as a coordinator. The success that he's already had is unbelievable. So I'm just very excited that we got to keep him here. And it also, I talk about attracting players and bringing in players when you have a guy like D'Anton Lynn, but also attracts coaches as well. And
Yeah.
we had a huge hire that we're going to talk about in a little bit here on the defensive side of the football that was an unbelievable hire and a big that doesn't happen. I don't think if we don't have D'Anton Lynn here, but it just when you have a guy like Lynn and we talked about, or we talked to so many players on Trojans Live, and I'll kind of finish with this, but they spoke so highly about Lynn, not only his football knowledge, not only the way that he carries himself on the field, the leader that he is, the way that he brings the best out of his players, but his ability to communicate to his players from the starters all the way down to walk-ons. That is unbelievable to me. Everybody said the
Yeah.
same exact thing about the way that he breaks the game down for me. I see the game from a different perspective. I see the game different than I ever have in my entire life because he teaches it to me, or he teaches it to me a way that I've never thought about before, and it gets the best out of me. And this was a continuous thing that was said throughout the entire year on Trojans Live from Greedy Vance Jr., Kamari Ramsey,
Yeah.
Easton Mascarenas Arnold. Everybody said the same thing. That is so
Genuinely too.
important.
It wasn't like a canned line.
No, it was and they all yeah, and they all felt the same way. That's just so important. That's why he's been able to have the success that he's had, like I said, both at UCLA in year 1, at USC in year 1. And I just can't wait to see him. This is his first time too, being a year 2 defensive coordinator at the same place. So,
I was about to
I'm
say.
excited to see what he's gonna be able to do, and like I said, I'm talking a lot about this, but I'm just this is probably the single most important thing for USC this offseason. It's a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, Cody, it's that teaching element to his coaching that makes me so excited for year 2 because like you said, we haven't seen that. So what does that look like for the players when their knowledge just grows under coaches that can really explain it and that IQ goes up? Like that's, talking about college football playoff and Ohio State, you could tell that those defenses, they are a close-knit defense that everyone trusts everyone on the field. You're doing your job. Like that is obviously the key to a successful national championship defense. And so if you build on what Lynn has been able to do multiple years of that, I can only imagine that that's the product we'll see going forward. So, like you mentioned, Cody, very excited about this news, arguably the most important news of the offseason for USC. But of course, the news always continues. And that moves me on to our next topic. USC hired a new GM. And you talk about taking someone away from your rival. USC continued that streak with Chad Bowden. He was hired away from Notre Dame. He also served as their GM there. And what's interesting too, Cody, is that by all accounts, he was very close with Marcus Freeman. Not only did they work together at Notre Dame, but they both worked together at Cincinnati. So not only are you hiring away from your rival, but you're taking away from a head coach who really trusted this guy. So I thought it was interesting on that front. But before I just toss it over to you, Cody, I want to include Bowden's quote in the press release. He said, "Jen Cohen, Lincoln Riley, and USC's total commitment to excellence makes this a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is a place with the resources, facilities, and support to build a perennial winner, and I'm excited to get to work to help bring more national championships to USC." So seemed like a big statement in the college football world that USC was able to hire away Bowden from Notre Dame.
Yeah, I love this move by USC, and I love it a little bit more because we went and got him from our rival at Notre Dame. But for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with Bowden, Keely briefly mentioned it here in the intro, but he was a general manager a year ago at Notre Dame. Before that, he was a defensive recruiting coordinator and director of recruiting at Notre Dame. And, I know I'm not the only one that was watching that game on January 20th, the national championship game, and seeing our rival Notre Dame in that game and a little frustrated that USC isn't quite at that caliber yet, right? It takes me off a little bit sitting at home watching that after we just went 6-6 in the regular season. It was a big win in the bowl game, and I love that momentum going into the offseason, but it's frustrating seeing your rival play for a national championship while we're struggling a little bit. We go 500 throughout the year. I know we had chances to win some of these games. The record isn't quite what the season was, and it doesn't tell the entire story, but it's frustrating that we're not to that level, that we're not competing for conference championships, that we're not in the college football playoff, that we're not playing for national championships. We have the resources and everything here at USC to get there. We're just not quite there yet. But a big part of that, and why I'm so excited about this hire, is Chad Bowden played a huge role in Notre Dame getting to where they are today, right? He worked hand in hand alongside Marcus Freeman. And Freeman has said this before about Bowden, how important he was at building the roster at Notre Dame. I fully expect him to do the same thing here at USC. We need that here at USC. We need a huge kickstart, a huge jump, and this new era of recruiting. I know NIL
Yeah.
plays a factor, but the people that you have here also plays just as important as the role, in my opinion. Now, that's not true for everyone, and we're not going to get I don't want to get too into that because it's tough to say, okay, you can do everything right and recruit the right guys and have the great pitches and send the right coaches to watch the practice, the games, to be there to get to know the family, and then someone comes in and throws a little bit more money. Some of these guys are going to take that. I totally get that, right? You can't do anything about that. But when it comes to building those relationships for the players that want that. And we just talked about D'Anton Lynn staying here, right? For the players that it's going to attract that want to be here because of the development they're going to have, because Bowden being here, building a roster, because Lincoln Riley, D'Anton Lynn, the coaches that are here on roster, that's going to be so important. And Bowden knows what it takes, like I said, to build that championship caliber roster. And most importantly, he knows what it takes to build that roster with people in our own backyard. Right. We
Yeah.
have to be able to recruit better in the Southern California area. I hate to get into the whole star count and all of that. But there's some 3 or 4 star guys that love USC and they could help out this roster that maybe we want, but don't know if they'd be a great fit that we may lose out on here and there. And they're going to go to other places. But I'm talking about the 5-star, can't miss, surefire, have to have recruits that go to some of these local high schools that grew up diehard USC fans that we aren't getting. We have to be able to get those guys. Chad Bowden is going to play an important role in that. Some of the coaches we're going to talk about, Chad Savage, our tight end coach, a huge recruiter. We're going to talk about him in a minute. Some of those coaches that we brought in that are great recruiters have to play a huge role in that. D'Anton Lynn staying around plays a huge role in that. So I'm just very excited that Bowden's going to be here. He's going to help us take that next step in recruiting. He's going to help us get to where we need to be when it comes to building a championship caliber roster. And I really hope, and again, I hate using it as an example, but I have to. But I really want us to get to where Notre Dame is right now, right? To how what he did at Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman, a new head coach, right? It's not like Freeman's been there for a long time. They built this, huge program where he's been there for 20 years and it's been a powerhouse. They have had recent success in this new landscape of college football, and a huge part of that is Chad Bowden. Now we have him here at USC, so I expect him to do the same thing here with this roster and get things going and get us to the caliber that we deserve to be at here at USC.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it seems like obviously in this new era of college football, there's so many unique problems, and this hire feels like a unique solution to those problems,
Great
keeping
point.
USC update in that sense. And I'm also interested to see how quickly and how much Bowden takes over, not only because, it's a new guy coming in, but if I'm correct, I believe this is the first support staff hire that's outside of either someone who was already at USC or someone who came with Lincoln Riley over to USC. So having some fresh blood in that whole system and having a new
Yeah.
perspective, well, I'm sure will be interesting because Riley's even talked about it with Lynn coming in. He looks at things that USC was doing and goes like, what if we do X, Y, and Z, or what if we change this? So I'm sure that Bowden will also have that perspective because that's what happens when you're a new guy coming in. So curious to see how that also evolves what USC does as well.
Yeah, those are some great points, and it kind of leads me to my last two topics on this subject. And the first one being is it takes a lot of pressure off of Lincoln Riley, right? And kind of like it did with Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. But the question for me is how much control will Bowden have as a general manager for USC, right? He needs to be able to come in and do his job the right way. What that push and pull will be between Riley and Bowden is remains to be seen, right? And that's something for me, and that's one of those things we always talk about. We'd love to be a fly on the wall between that meeting or those conversations between Lincoln and Chad and how they're going to, work through that and how much control will Bowden have over the roster and how much control will Lincoln Riley have over the roster because general managers, GMs in college football is completely new, right? If you would have told me 10 years ago when I was playing that there's going to be GMs in college football 10 years from now, I couldn't even have fathomed the thought of that, right? That's just unbelievable to me because head coaches, position coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, they handle the roster, right? They send out the offers. They know what they need on this team. They know the type of guys they want in their program. That's normally what it is, but that's not the case anymore because there's so many aspects of recruiting, of NIL, of transfer portal, of having to get a guy right away before he goes somewhere else, of having to top someone else's offer like NFL free agency. The need for GMs is essential. It makes sense to me. And you have to have great ones to build a great roster, right? And I really believe Chad Bowden is that, and the proof is in the product. He saw it at Notre Dame, but that's my biggest question: is what does USC's GM look like when it's compared to an NFL GM, right? When you're an
Mm,
NFL GM, and for those who don't know, when you play in the NFL, a GM, besides some places, obviously Bill Belichick, when I was with the Patriots, has a lot more control, right? He had people that helped
sure.
him, when it came to recruiting college players or to evaluating players. He had a lot of guys that he trusted. But in most NFL organizations, the GM pretty much has the entire decision making process when it comes to drafting guys a free agent. Now we'll have some input from coaches from hey, scout this guy for me, talk about this. But the GMs have full control. That's really what it comes down to. And look at Chicago with the Bears, Ryan Polt. Like, I mean, he built that roster himself, right? And now they have a new coach, but the GM stays tied to those rosters, right? Those are the guys that he brought in that he wants that they want to build. That the decisions that they make are huge to those organizations. My biggest question is that going to be what it's going to be like here for USC with Chad Bowden? Or is it going to be 50-50 with Lincoln and Bowden? That remains to be seen. I'm sure we'll learn a lot more the more time that Bowden's here, and especially this next wave of the transfer portal and this recruiting cycle, and maybe even give it a couple years to see what Bowden does, right? You don't want to judge a guy too quickly and try to have a
Yeah.
turnaround right away. But either way, with all that being said, it's just a huge step in the right direction. And then the final thing I'll say about this, and this is a shot at our rival a little bit. I know they played in the national championship, but we always are going to have this one on them. You got better resources here at USC, and I can't wait to see what Bowden does with that. Right? You've got the beaches, you got the LA lifestyle, You've got, the weather, you got NIL opportunities that you have in Southern California. You're one of the best media markets in the entire country, outside of New York. So those are huge things. But also then you look on campus, you have the tradition here at USC, you have the facilities that we have, the things that we're building, right? The football field that we added a new practice field, we added a new football only facility. All these things that are happening are going to give Bowden so much more opportunities to recruit and build a roster here at USC. No offense, than he probably had in South Bend, Indiana. I don't know if you've ever been to Notre Dame, and Keely, I know you have, but it is in the middle of nowhere, and it's almost more of a credit to Bowden to be able to do what he's done at Notre Dame with not as many resources. I know it's a great program. Look, I give them a hard time because they're our rival. I know it's a great program with great tradition, and it's. I'm not saying it's like a smaller school, but you have more resources here at USC, better opportunities, better location, all of those things. I just can't wait to see what he does with all of these things at his disposal. And I think he's going to do a great job of building this roster the way it needs to be. It's just going to be how much push and pull is he going to have with Lincoln Riley, but that remains to be seen. But I can't wait to see what he does here with the Trojans.
Well, that's partially why I included what Bowden said in his statement about describing coming to USC as a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm sure that has to hurt if you're a Notre Dame fan, let alone
Hey,
if you've been this close with Marcus Freeman for that long. Like that, I know
he, hey,
press
he,
releases are what they are,
I'm
but that
glad you
has
said
to
that.
hurt.
He said that, not me. That's basically what I was getting at. But Bowden obviously backs that up.
Well, I want to get to, I think we'll describe as the most surprising move so far this offseason. But before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. What you expect from an SUV is a range of sizes to fit your lifestyle. Expectations matter, but exceeding them matters more. The Audi family of SUVs, progress you can feel. Already, Cody, I teased it, but Rob Ryan was named the assistant head coach for defense and linebackers coach for USC. He obviously replaces Matt Entz, who left for Fresno State. Back-to-back years, Cody, that USC kind of just blows us away with who they're able to fill for a linebackers coaching position.
Yeah, I could not believe this hire when I saw it on Twitter. This is probably the biggest surprise for me so far this offseason. I had to refresh my phone actually a couple times when I saw the news announced because I thought maybe it was a mistake or it was a fake account, putting out some fake news. But sure enough, it was true. I just couldn't believe that we hired the legendary Rob Ryan to come coach linebackers as a position coach here at USC. Now, I know titles matter, so he's not just a linebackers coach. He's also an assistant head coach, but he had been in the NFL for so long. It just surprised me that we were able to get him to come down to the college level to come coach linebackers. And I say that to say I wish I could have been a fly on the wall and hear how that pitch went between D'Anton Lynn, Jen Cohen, and Lincoln Riley to Rob Ryan. Because
Right?
before coming to USC, Ryan was the senior defensive assistant for the Raiders the last couple of years. I just would have loved to seen what that pitch was and what that offer was and what the talk was about. Hey, do you have any interest of coming back to college? Would you love to come here at USC? Not to be a defensive coordinator, but to be a position coach and coach linebackers alongside D'Anton Lynn. And obviously it made sense to him. So I'm so excited that we got him. And you may be a little confused why that happened and why, and it is, I'm not going to lie, a little random, right? The Rob Ryan name, I think, surprised a lot of fans, but there is overlap between D'Anton Lynn and the Ryan brothers. He talked so highly, and Keely's mentioned before, one of his first press conferences, I think one of his biggest influences was Rex Ryan,
Yeah.
and helping him get to where he is today. And then there was some overlap with Rob Ryan as well. Lynn and Rob were both in Buffalo together in 2016. Lynn was a defensive assistant, and Rob Ryan was the assistant head coach of the defense. And then again in 2021 with the Baltimore Ravens, Lynn coached the safeties, and Rob Ryan coached the inside linebackers. So there is some overlap. Obviously, that played a huge role. Coach Ryan feels very comfortable with D'Anton Lynn and just the age difference, too. I mean, you see that a
Right?
lot maybe in
Yeah.
college football, but you got D'Anton Lynn, who's a second-year defensive coordinator, and then you have Rob Ryan, who's a two-time Super Bowl winning coach, has 24 years of experience in the NFL, and I think over 30 years total as a coach to come be a position coach under D'Anton Lynn. So that just also speaks volumes about how much these coaches respect D'Anton Lynn and his vision here at USC.
For sure, but it's almost like a double-edged sword when it comes to his experience in the NFL because it makes you think obviously he has so much knowledge, but we have been in the world of college football and are still trying to keep up with how much it's changed. So I'm sure it must be a lot for him, but he's already on the recruiting trail. We've seen photos from prospects. You see him in the USC gear in high schools.
Yeah.
I'm sure that has to be a whirlwind for him to go from, you're an analyst for an NFL team and suddenly you're in a high school trying to recruit a 17-year-old, I'm curious how that quick switch to recruiting has been. But what's interesting is Lynn also had to do that as well. He went from the NFL ranks to
Yeah.
recruiting in this new age of college football. So I'm sure obviously they're swapping stories and experience, but How does he adjust to college life in this new era? I'm very curious about.
Yeah, and off topic real quick, and Rob Ryan obviously fits this category, but you said that and it made me think about what I just saw the other day on Twitter too. Seeing Bill Belichick, and I played for him before, so I know
I
the
was
type
gonna
of
ask
coach
you
that
this.
he
I
is.
didn't want to go off topic,
Seeing him,
but
it's off-season episode. We're allowed to do that on these, but seeing him at some of those at-home visits, right? Because you see the coaches in the SC
yeah,
gear, the gear, and trying to be relatable. He's in the full suit and tie with the blazer on, and I've been in countless meetings with him. And I know the way that he is, and he's a great coach. I think he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. I absolutely had a blast when I was in New England from 2019 to 2020. But I've been in meetings with him, both team meetings and then quarterback meetings, when he would come in on Saturday and work with the offense with me and Tom Brady and Jarrett Stidham. Just the way that he coaches and the way that he talks to you is a little different, right, than maybe some of these younger coaches. So
sure.
it's just crazy to me, some of these older veteran coaches that have been in the NFL so long now having to go and do NIL recruiting and talk to these 17-year-olds and try to be relatable. But obviously these coaches can adapt or else they wouldn't have been around this long. But that kind of
Good
leads me into
point.
Rob Ryan. And the two things, and then I'll say that first. The only concern I have, I don't want to say concern. I guess the only thing that's going to be
Question
interesting is
mark.
how that plays out. And I think that is important to talk about. He hasn't coached in college, talking about Rob Ryan here, hasn't coached in college since 1999 when he was the defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State. Ever since then, he's been in the NFL, right? So will that be an issue? How long will that adjustment period take? But like I said, someone with his experience, I think, is going to help so much. But that leads me to my 2 points of why I really love this hire and why I think it's so important for USC football, obviously, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He's been coaching for over 35 years, right? That's the knowledge and the experience that he has. He's won 2 Super Bowls. He's been around and coach some of the greatest players on defense to ever walk this earth, some of the greatest coaches to ever walk this earth, that he's taken from them, that he's, swapped ideas in meetings, that he's been on practice fields and watched the way that these players practice, these coaches coach, and now he's bringing all of that to USC. That is, you just it's very rare to have that at the college level. And the fact that we have him here as a position coach is unbelievable. If I'm a linebacker, if I'm even on the defensive side of the ball, even if I'm a quarterback, if I'm at USC right now and Rob Ryan comes over to coach linebackers, I'm absolutely going into his office and I'm a sponge. I'm saying, hey, coach, I know I coach quarterbacks. We're probably never going to overlap. You're not going to, come into our offensive meetings, but can you teach me what this guy saw when you were with New England, what this guy saw when you were with the Cowboys, wherever you may have been? Can you teach me what defensive players look for with just the experience you have? Some of the best quarterbacks you've ever played against. What made it so difficult, to go against them? I am, and obviously I'm talking from an offense perspective, but of a defensive guy, I am in his office every single day. I am following him around with a pen and paper and taking everything he says to heart. Those notes are going to be so important. And there's other guys on this staff, obviously, with D'Anton Lynn and some of these younger coaches. I'm not saying you have to have that experience to be a great coach, but when you have someone like that on your staff, the resources that you have at USC, and one of those being Rob Ryan as our linebacker coach, take
Yeah.
it that. If I'm a high school player, if I'm a parent that is getting recruited to USC, I am sitting down, especially at the linebacker spot, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to everything that Rob Ryan has to say and how is he going to help my player or my son or my kid get to that NFL level and play at the highest level for a long time, because Rob Ryan knows what it takes. So that's huge for me. And then the other thing, the input that he's going to have when it comes to game planning. Like I mentioned, he's been around some of the greatest coaches ever coached this game. And we've talked about before how D'Anton Lynn, he said it himself. He said, "This isn't my scheme. I take everything from Coach Nua, from Coach Henderson when he was with the Rams, when Coach Ince was here. I take everything from all these guys, Doug Belk. I add that and I make it our scheme." Now you're going to add Rob Ryan to that mix. That just the experience in that defensive staff in that room, the game plans that they're going to come up with, I can't wait to see. And now you have the
Right.
foundation laid, like I mentioned, with D'Anton Lynn already being here for a year. Now you go into year 2 and you add Rob Ryan to that mix. It's just, I'm so excited about that. I think it's a great hire for USC. It's going to be awesome for not only the recruiting, guys in the transfer portal, some of these high school players, but also the guys that are here to keep guys around that want to develop under Rob Ryan and get to that next level. So I'm so excited for that. Again, still shocked. I kind of had to rub my eyes and I keep refreshing my phone because I can't believe it. But yeah, the fact that we've got Rob Ryan to come here as a linebacker coach is a huge move in the right direction for this USC staff.
And you alluded to it, but it's a huge credit too to Lynn's ability to not only coach well but keep those relationships up. Yeah, I don't think a guy like Rob Ryan comes to USC to coach linebackers unless he truly respects Lynn. So another good thing towards Lynn in that
A
regard.
a 34-year-old D'Anton Lynn too at that.
Yes,
It's not like,
yes, good
it's not
point.
like he's a veteran coach. That's and I'm glad you brought that up. That's just it is crazy. And I know we're moving along here. I'm not trying to get, harp too much on it, but just being in the NFL, being in college For that to happen, that's a huge deal, right? You
Yeah.
don't get someone like Rob Ryan to say, okay, I'll come coach linebackers if, like you just mentioned, he doesn't fully trust and believe in the vision that D'Anton Lynn has here at USC, because that goes back to I would have loved to hear that pitch and what it took for D'Anton, because Rob Ryan doesn't need the money, right? I mean, obviously you can throw a huge offer at him, but he's been coaching so long. He's set for life. He's doing it because, like we mentioned, he trusts D'Anton Lynn and he wants to see USC be great and he wants to be a part of that. And he sees the vision that Lynn and Lincoln Riley have for his staff and this football team.
Now it's interesting, Cody. I'm going to make a hard switch on the spectrum, if you will. We go from 35 years of coaching experience to a more younger, up and comer coach that USC hired, Chad Savage, which, first of all, incredible name, Coach Savage.
Great name.
But he was hired as USC's tight ends and inside wide receivers coach. He served as the wide receivers coach and recruiting coordinator at Colorado State from 2022 to 2024. I believe he was the first hire announced in this offseason period, Cody. Curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, this is a great hire for USC. And like you mentioned, he's an up and coming coach. He's hungry. He knows what it takes to recruit in this new era of college football. He's one of the best recruiters in the entire country. He was a Mountain West Recruiter of the Year for 3 straight years. He has had a huge impact in Southern California, more specifically the Los Angeles area, which is something we need to improve on with our recruiting here at USC. When he was at Colorado State, his primary recruiting areas was Southern California and a little bit of Arizona. So he knows the area. He knows what it takes to and think about this too. He was getting guys to leave Los Angeles, Southern California to go to Colorado, right? Going from the sunshine and the beaches and the good weather to going to the freezing cold snow. And I don't know how many of you have been to Colorado or played football in Colorado. It is cold. It is not a lot of fun, right? You've got to have a different mindset. So for him to be able to go get some high end recruits and get them to go play, and Colorado State's a great school, but to play in that weather, to move away from home, to go play in that atmosphere is unbelievable. Imagine what he can do here at USC, right? To convince these Southern California kids to stay close to home, it's going to make his job so much easier and have the resources he has here at USC. So I fully expect him to have a huge impact with the local kids for USC and also around the country, right? And not just tight ends, though. I expect him to be a big time recruiter with the receivers, with quarterbacks, with the entire offense, right? That's why you go get guys like Chad Savage are great recruiters, because they know how to relate to these players. Right, they know how to go into these at-home visits, to go alongside Lincoln Riley on some of these visits, wherever it may be in the country, and convince these guys to come spend the next 3 to 4 years at USC. Well, 8 months, whatever it may be now with the transfer portal. But and I say all this to say too, I don't want people to think, oh, he's just a great recruiter. He's developed some really good players at Colorado State as well, right? You can't just be a good recruiter and then the kid gets to campus and doesn't develop the right way, right? You've got to be both.
Yeah.
Now you can
Yeah.
excel in recruiting and still be a great coach, but you can't just be good at one, right? You've got to be good at both. So I don't want to take away from his ability as a coach because we're talking about him as a recruiter. He's done a great job of developing wide receivers at Colorado State, allowing guys that go to Colorado State to get to the next level, to have opportunities in the NFL, to help them to reach their full potential. Had a couple of 1,000-yard receivers the last couple of years, so I'm very excited for what he's going to do for this tight end room and the inside receivers. Also, he spent some time in Nevada and San Diego, so although he is a newer coach, he does have a little bit of experience there. But yeah, it's a great hire for USC. The name alone, I was already sold. Looking into his background, not only as a coach, but as a recruiter, I'm very excited for his potential and what he can do here for the Trojans.
It's interesting too because I obviously don't run in recruiting circles, so I did more research on Savage once it was announced, and apparently he has a really great reputation among SoCal high schools and their coaches. So a boost for USC in that sense, especially because I feel like it was a direct response to maybe some of the criticism they received this past season about maybe they're not going to Southern California high schools as much as they should have. I'm not in the weeds with that, so I don't know if that's true or not, but that was a criticism put out there. So not only is a response in that sense, but USC tweeted earlier this month that they visited 164 Southern California high schools in the first 2 weeks of this recruiting cycle.
Wow.
So yeah, a big boost there. So you can tell that they are receptive, Jim Cohen and this football program, receptive to maybe the areas of improvement that needs to happen, and they're directly responding to it. And so the reason I say this is it feels like Savage is a hire, not only because of the development that you talked about, Cody, but reestablishing that fence, that border around Southern California and its top prospects and saying, hey, we want you to come to USC and this is the place to be. So it's cool to see USC react in that sense and also bring someone who's a great recruiter from Colorado into his kind of territory where he makes his money there.
Yeah, and the point you made right there, and that's something that I said earlier, I think is so important because are we going to get every single Southern California recruit that we want? No, I get that, right? There's kids that want to go to other places. There's going to be the kids that want to go to Oregon, that want to go to Alabama, Ohio State. They want to go other places and get out of California and go play at some of these other schools. But if I'm USC, if I'm Lincoln Riley, if I'm this coaching staff, and there are some 5-star, 4-star, I don't care what star you are. Let's take that out. But if there's kids that we see on tape that are in Southern California that we think, hey, we have to get this kid. We cannot miss on this high school recruit. He has to come to USC. There's no reason that we shouldn't get him, especially if they're local in this area and they grew up a USC fan, right? And there's that pipeline and they want to be a Trojan. There is no reason. I don't care. I mean, I know the NIL will play a factor, but we've got to be able to match that. We've got to be able to have the coaches, the recruiters, the NIL, House of Victory. They're doing a great job. All of the resources that we have, we can't lose these top recruits. Are we going to get all of them? No, I understand that. But the ones that need to be here that we think are surefire recruits that we cannot allow to leave the state, that can't leave USC, we have to be able to keep those guys close to home. And hiring a guy like Chad Savage is a huge step in the right direction for that. Keeping D'Anton Lynn is a huge step in the right direction. The things that Coach Riley and Jen Cohen have done this offseason are all huge steps in the right direction for that. So I'm happy to see that they are being proactive with the LA area, with the Southern California area, by hiring someone like Savage, who's familiar and has great reputation and great relationship with the coaches in this area. But now we've got to go get the job done, right? It all looks good on paper. It looks great with the hires. It looks great in all the articles. But we've got to go prove it, like you said, to build the fence around Southern California and keep these guys in our own backyard that want to be Trojans, keep them here and let them develop here at USC.
Well, I want to finish, Cody, with one final hire that USC made, and they actually made it on Tuesday, so a recent one. Trevon Reed was named the corners coach. He comes from UCF. I don't know about you, Cody, but this was somewhat surprising to me, especially because we saw that Doug Belk really handled USC's secondary. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought about the role that Taylor Mays played on this coaching staff. And we
Yeah.
haven't talked about it yet, but he left for a position coaching job at Washington, which is, first of all, congrats to him. He's from the
Yeah.
Washington area. Huge move for him to get his first coaching job. He's now a safeties coach there. So congrats to him. But I think this move of hiring Reed speaks to Mays' influence on the defense and how he kind of was coaching towards the end. I would watch warm-ups and a bit of practice. He was a integral part in the coaching of the secondary. So this kind of, to me, feels like a response to Mays leaving and kind of bolstering that coaching aspect in the back end, but also recruiting as well. Word on the street is that he's a great recruiting guy as well. So curious about your thoughts there, Cody, because this is a kind of a surprising one for me in that regard.
Yeah, I like this move by USC, and it was an interesting one, but I think you hit the nail on the head there with T. Mays leaving, and just reiterate that. Love Taylor. Wish him nothing but the best. I think he's going to do great things at Washington, but that does leave a void in that DB room. Obviously, Doug Belk is there, but that adds another coach that can be hands-on, that can help out a little bit with the corners, that can help out with the DBs as a whole. But he's a younger coach, right? Only 1 year of experience. Last year was his first year as a position coach at UCF. He coached cornerbacks. Before that, he was the director of football and player relations at Auburn for a couple seasons. So he played at Auburn back when they won 2 conference titles. He also won a national championship in 2010 when he was at Auburn. But the interesting thing for me, and I've talked about this before with other coaches or other coordinators that I love, is he played receiver for his first 4 years at Auburn. Then his last year, he made the move to play DB, to play corner,
Oh, okay.
had 3 interceptions, 14 tackles, a couple pass breakups. But, I've always been, when I say that I've played quarterback my entire life, but I could probably coach a defense better because I
Yeah.
spent so much time watching and breaking down defenses. Is kind of the same for Coach Reed. And that's why I think it's going to be awesome for some of the guys in that room is he can get inside the minds of receivers, right? Can teach these corners
Yeah.
what he thought as being a high-end recruit and playing obviously at the college level for 4 years as a receiver and help them understand a little bit more what receivers are thinking, what they're trying to do. And I just think it adds an extra element into that room. But like I said, yeah, it's interesting. Only 1 year of coaching, but I think the recruiting plays a big role in that. We've heard a lot of good things. And like Keely mentioned, reading the articles and doing a little background on him, a lot of these players spoke very highly of him, not only as a coach, but as a recruiter. And I think that's going to work hand in hand here at USC. It's going to give Doug Belt an extra set of eyes and help D'Anton Lynn, obviously, on the defensive staff, and just a younger coach that can relate to the players a little bit better, right? And just add a little bit of personality into that room. So it'll be fun to watch and see what he can do here at USC. And this is somewhere that needs to improve next year, right? We talked about pass defense, not taking a huge step forward, something that needs to get better if we want to compete. For conference titles, for national championships, add someone like Trevon Reed and the experience he has as a player and as a recruiter, and now, an up and coming coach is going to be great, I think, for this DB room.
Alrighty, Cody, one final news item before we jump into questions. Annie Hansen, who serves as USC's executive director of recruiting, announced on Twitter Tuesday night that she will be stepping back from her role. She recently started a family with offensive line coach Zach Hansen, so she said she wanted to focus on being a mom for the time being. So just wanted to congratulate her, not only on starting a family, but for what she was able to do in the recruiting world and at
Yeah.
USC. We've heard from recruits and prospects that she had a great deal to do with their experience when they come visit USC. So just wanted to add that and also alert that there will be another role for USC to fill going forward. So we'll be sure to be on that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Huge congratulations to both Coach Hansen and Annie. And it was cool. We did the Trojan Tailgate show for the bowl game, and I do pre-recorded interviews for the offensive game plan segment. And I chose Coach Hansen specifically because we both had newborns around the same time. So it was cool. My last question to him was kind of talking about that, and we both had sons. But I say we, our wives, our amazing wives, Annie, my wife Paige, did all the hard work. We're just there for moral support, right? I don't want to take any credit there. But I get it. I completely get it. It's a lot of work, right? It's a full time job being a parent, and especially having a newborn, your first one. Both of us having our first kids, so I get where they're at right now, and I can only imagine, Coach Hansen being recruiting on the road, doing all these other things, and having to travel, and also get ready for spring ball and all of that, and then Annie, who's doing just as much work, if not more, behind the scenes, and also trying to be present and come home and be a parent. So I think this is 100% the right move for her. I'm so happy that she made that decision. And I think I speak for everybody when I say, and especially Coach Riley and that staff, whenever she is ready to come back and that time comes and she's ready to step back into that role, I'm sure everybody will welcome her with open arms. And just the last thing I'll say about Annie is, you know, you see so much, and I've been a recruit, and I've hosted players when I was there, and I've also seen it as a former player now. The coaches, the staff, everyone involved, the players that do the hosting, all of that, they get all the praise and, hey, they landed this recruit and they did that. And great job, Coach Riley, Coach Belk, all these other coaches, that go out and Coach Hewitt getting this quarterback, they get all the credit and they play a big role in that. But the things that you don't see that go on behind the scenes with Annie and her staff and everyone that helps her and everyone in that department when it comes to recruiting, setting up for official visits, setting up for these events, making the parents feel welcome, making the brothers, the sisters, the family members feel welcome is unbelievable. It's a lot of late nights and early mornings. It's so important. It's almost as important as the coaches and the role that they play in recruiting. So I completely get that she needs a little break from that to go home and be a mom. And I'm just so excited for her and Zach. So that's awesome. But like I said, Annie, wish you nothing but the best. But it's great too, because Zach obviously is still here as the offensive line coach. So we'll get
Yeah.
updates on Annie and everything that's going on with her and their son Rock. And I'm sure we'll see him at all the games coming up this fall and
A
spring
true
ball and
Trojan.
everything. And him and my son Brooks, I've already talked to Coach Riley. They've already got offers in the
Wow.
mail, so they'll be ready to go.
Okay.
They'll be ready to go. Brooks will be at quarterback,
Class
and
of what?
will be at offensive line blocking for him. So we're ready to go. But no, yeah, again, I'm glad you brought that up. Huge shout out to Annie. She's been amazing for this program, and if she does want to, whenever that time comes, I'm sure everyone will welcome her back with open arms. But yeah, go be a mom, and I get it. That's the most important thing. Right now is being there for your son. So we're excited for her and Zach.
Alrighty, Cody, I want to head over into questions. Before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. Focus matters. Listen closely. The Audi Q8 e-tron's cabin is serenely quiet, so you can focus on other things like having tomorrow's technology today. The new fully electric Audi Q8 e-tron, how we get there matters. And at Ralph's, everyone wins when it comes to saving big, because when you order online through the Ralph's app, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards on pickup or delivery that you do in store. So no matter how you shop, you always save big at Ralph's. Ralph's, fresh for everyone. Fight on. Now, Cody, we talked about Rob Ryan, and I actually want to keep on that topic, talking about the linebacker room. Smiles and AZ said, it's looking like the weak point in our defense is at linebacker. How many transfer portal linebackers do you think we need? Fight on. So as far as depth goes, linebacker seems like an area of need for sure, right?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, AZ. I really think we need to continue to add depth, not only to the linebacker spot, but just the front seven in general, right? And there's been some players that we've added to this roster this offseason that I'm very excited about. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we do a roster breakdown episode for both offense and defense before spring ball starts. And it's kind of get to know the players, if you will, type episode. But yeah, I think the more depth you can add on defense, especially when you have a coach like D'Anton Lynn, because we saw a year ago when he'd have packages for Desmond Stevens to come in, right? At Easton Mascarenas Arnold and Mason Cobb, with Eric Gentry being out, played the majority of the game, but there were Desmond Stevens packages. There were packages where some of these 2 deep and 3 deep players at linebacker would come in on third down in special situations, right? On some second and long, on passing situations, or some of these short yardage situations. So the more depth, the better. But I'm with you on that. I think we need to add more depth at linebacker, add more depth at the defensive line. If you want to compete in the Big Ten, if you want to compete for national championships, you have to have a great 1 deep, but also 2 deep unit on the defensive side of the ball, especially the front 7, and even some 3 deep guys that can come in for certain situations. But I definitely think linebacker is an area to address when it comes to adding a little bit more depth before spring ball and fall camp starts.
It's a similar topic, I guess. Larry said, which incoming transfer are you most excited to see play? But I will give the disclaimer, USC has not announced their transfer portal signees yet. They announced 21 high school players, which, funnily enough, we actually were going to break down those transfers, but then you had a child, Cody, so we had to postpone that for a while. We will get back to it because you did all the work for it. Yeah, you did all the scouting. You did the film watching.
You know what, though? Real quick, I know, and what Keely's going to get to, I didn't mean to cut you off, is we can't talk about them until
they have officially
announce it,
signed,
because we're affiliated with USC, and
it would be an NCAA violation if we didn't.
Yeah, but real quick before, because I wanted you to get that thought out, but I think we can actually do one of these upcoming episodes, and we'll talk about this when we do our outro, breaking down some of those high school recruits, because I've Hassan Longstreet, I've been watching him, broke down his film, watched him at one of those, I think he played an all-star game recently and lit it up. There's some other guys, Jakeem Stewart on campus already. I'm excited about him. So there is a lot of exciting things on the horizon. We will talk about some of these recruits, but like Keely mentioned, yes, we are affiliated with USC. So until the school announces that they are signed and all of that, we can't do anything. But I know if you can't tell, Keely kind of hit a sweet spot. I love talking recruits. I love evaluating players. I love talking about incoming players. It's one of my things I love to do as, being a broadcaster now.
Yeah, so once the school announces it, that means that, because they also need approval to announce it as well. Like, it has to be pen to paper. So that's kind of our signal that we also can talk about them. So that's why we're not talking about it. But you actually took my question away from you, Cody. I was going to modify it and just say which high school transfer, after looking at their tape, you're most excited for.
I mean, I'm Hassan Longstreet for me is probably the most exciting. I'm just a quarterback. I can't wait to watch the Jaden Maiava and the Hassan Longstreet quarterback battle this offseason. I think that's going to be one of the most important position battles. Obviously, it's a quarterback spot, and it's always the most important on the field, or one of. But I'm so excited to watch how that shakes out. And obviously, Maiava showed some great flashes a year ago, only played in a couple games. So, you've got to take that with a grain of salt. You can't just judge him on all of that. You've got to allow him time to develop, to self-scout, to watch some of that tape from a year ago and learn from his mistakes, and then obviously improve and build off of some of the positives he has as well. But I saw some film, like I said, from Hassan Longstreet and what he did at that all-star game and what he did in high school, and breaking down his film. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great quarterback competition. I think Longstreet has a legit shot to come in here and compete and fight for that QB1 spot. It's USC, though. It doesn't matter whether you're a four-year or you're a newcomer. The best players are going to play. You have to come in and compete. If you want to build a great football team, there has to be competition. So I can't wait to watch that. But yeah, I think Hassan Longstreet would probably be my favorite pick. I'm quarterback bias, call it what it is. But it'll be fun to watch him and Maiava go at it this offseason and bring the best out of each other.
Steve said, I'm hearing and seeing a lot about an uptick in the push for local recruiting. Any thoughts and observations you have on that would be great. Fight on. Now, Steve, as I mentioned, I think in the middle of the show, I'm not in the recruiting circles, but I am on Twitter. And if you've seen, there's a lot of photos of coaches with prospects. It's just nonstop in my feed of thanks, Coach blah blah, for coming out to my high school today. So they've definitely have hit the recruiting trail hard so far this offseason. And as I mentioned, 164 local high schools visited in the first 2 weeks of the recruiting period. So I think that they've definitely heard the feedback they've gotten and have pushed for more local recruiting. So I think that it's a good thing on that front. And as we talked about, Cody, the Chad Savage move also points to that as well.
Yeah, just quickly for me, I ditto that. I mean, it's kind of, we've already talked on this, so I don't want to expand too much on it. But yeah, I'm with you on that. Just my biggest thing is, if there are recruits in Southern California, in LA, in this area that we want to have here at USC that are priority recruits, I guess is what you want to call them. They're blue chip guys that we do not want to leave and go elsewhere. We need to do whatever it takes to get them here at USC, especially if they grew up wanting to be a Trojan, right? These high-end I say surefire. You never really know how they're going to pan out. We've seen 5 stars that never play. We've seen no stars that become, first round draft picks. You really never know how a guy's going to be at the next level. But in just strictly recruiting wise out of high school, if there are local kids that we want here at USC that Lincoln Riley and his staff say, we've got to get this kid, got to get it done. Build that fence. Do not let them leave. Don't let them go to Oregon. Don't let them go other places in the Big Ten, whether it's in the Midwest, at Penn State, at Ohio State, or going to Oregon, Washington, any of those other schools. Don't let them go to the SEC. Let them stay home here at USC, come be a Trojan and develop here and do great things for the Trojans. But I'm with you on that. I think they're doing a great job with the coaches, with going out there and recruiting this area, and they've got to hit it even harder and keep these kids local.
De La Cruz said, do you think recruiting rankings matter as much now that we regularly see players transfer freely and without restriction?
De La Cruz, this is, I mean, you're hitting a nerve here with this. I love the question, but I've always been skeptical about these star rankings, the recruiting rankings. Oh, they had the best class. They had the number 2 class. They had the number 1 class. They're not even in the top 10 when it comes to high school rankings because, and I've talked about this, earlier on this episode, I have seen guys that I was either, competing against throughout high school or going against some of these camps or guys that have been at USC that are 5 stars that don't pan out in college. Now, some of those are injuries and other factors, and I get that that's, not the tell-all is that a guy didn't play well because he's a 5-star and he didn't live up to the hype. There's other things that happen, but guys that are 5 stars that didn't produce like 5 stars on the field end up going elsewhere, end up not really making it or getting to that next level. And I've also seen guys that are no stars that go on to be first-round draft picks, that go on to be star players or big-time players or 3-star guys that go on to be some of the best players that ever play at USC or play in college or play in the NFL. So I always take those rankings at a grain of salt. And it also differs from place to place, right? Keely is at 247. They have a system of how they do rankings. Rivals, all these other On3, all these other recruiting sites do different rankings. They have their different criteria. So I don't fully buy into those, especially at the high school level. Now, with that being said, I do think with the turnover with rosters and the importance of, if you want to look at recruiting rankings, I think the transfer portal rankings are more important because those are guys, most of them, some of them are younger guys that didn't play that transfer, but most of them are guys that have already played in college and you know what you're getting. And they can be evaluated at a college level instead of some of these high school recruits that haven't quite played at that next level because you never know what you're going to get. Same thing with the NFL. Guys that are always, if it was a surefire system and rankings meant the most, were the most important, then every first round pick in the NFL should always pan out to be a first round pick, right? But that just doesn't happen. So I still have to say, no, I don't fully trust the rankings, and I don't think they're super important. I think people who focus too much on the high school rankings are, oh, we don't have a top 10 class, fire the staff. Oh, we don't have a top 20 class, we're falling behind. I don't fully trust that with the high school rankings. Now, when it comes to transfer portal, I think that is a little bit more important. You can focus on that because you're getting guys that can come in and play right away and that you can evaluate actual college tape. But yeah, you can tell you hit a little nerve there, De La Cruz. You always have great questions, but yeah, I don't fully trust some of these sites when it comes to high school rankings and recruiting class and who has the upper hand when it comes, they got a better class and whatnot.
Skeptical Cody is out in full force. I love it.
I've seen when I played as long as I did and been around a lot of, 5 stars and no stars and all that. It's hard to trust that, right? Because I think it's a little bit of a flawed system. You just never know until they get on the field. But yeah, that's why the transfer portal one for me is a little bit more important.
No, that makes sense. Rigo said, didn't know we were in the market for a new cornerbacks coach. How does that affect Belk's role? And I think this points to, like we talked about, I think we underestimated or didn't fully realize how much impact that Taylor Mays had, especially
100%.
in regard to the NCAA rules where anyone could be an on-field coach in that sense. Like, he was really helping out last year. And I think it was either something that they knew they wanted, or once he started helping out, they're like, hey, we actually really like having that 2-coach system in the secondary. So I think that's why that happened. And also, if you can get a recruiting bump with that, I think that also helps as well. But yeah, I think we're obviously going to hear from these coaches and from Riley about these hires. So I'm curious what they say as far as how they came into the market to get Reed.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I think the recruiting thing played a big part in that. But also, your job is different as a safety and as a corner, right? And we had guys like Jalen Smith that could do it all and play different positions. We had Greedy Vance Jr. last year that played nickel, that could play outside. We had guys that could move around a lot. And then we also had, with D'Anton Lynn's system, we had a Keely Eure who played safety and then he'd play nickel, or you have Kamari Ramsey move around. But I think it is a little bit better when you have a spot like that and a little bit more position specific when you have Trevon Reed, who played corner at Auburn, right, who bounced around a little bit in the NFL and in some other, professional leagues at the football level. And then you have a guy like Doug Belk who can kind of oversee all the DBs. But I think it is important, like you mentioned, to have a safeties coach, a corners coach. Guys are going to be a little bit more hands on and fill the role or fill the void that Taylor Mays left when he went to Washington. But yeah, I think either way, the more high powered or high level recruiters that you can add to this staff that can also be great on-field coaches and assistants and help out, the better, right? If we can, let's get as many as we can. I think Trevon Reed fits that category perfectly, and I'm excited to see how he's going to help develop these players come spring and fall.
Brian said, how come our quarterbacks don't wear wrist playbooks?
Yeah, that would be a very long episode if I gave the full details on that. My mind just went a million miles per hour right there to break down everything. But I'll say this, though. That's a great question. And we love these off-season episodes when we have a little bit more time because we can do a full breakdown episode. If you ever want to know anything, it doesn't have to always be when we put out questions USC related. I played in the NFL for a long time, played in college for a long time. If you want to know any of those questions of behind the scenes stuff in the NFL, behind the scenes stuff in college, whether from, on the field, off the field, any of those things, please ask those questions. I love answering them. Keely loves them too. And it doesn't have to be football related. We love the offseason because we get a chance to answer and a lot of questions, get to know our listeners a little bit better. But the short answer for that is when I played with Kiffin, we had wristbands because we were a huddle team, right? So there would be 5 sections on it, different colors. You'd go color number. So it'd be red 5. I'd flip the wristband, the red section, find play 5, call the play, break the huddle. When I got with Sark, we got rid of wristband because we were all signals, which meant we would hold up a sign for your formation. Then the offensive line coach would signal one thing, the wide receiver coach, the play caller, whoever it would be, you'd have a bunch of people signaling. Only one of them was live, so you could hide your signals. So then we didn't need a wristband because we didn't huddle, so you go quick. Now you have teams, and this was all before helmet communication. You do have teams that do both signals, but also have wristbands on. And the reason for that is because you'll signal a bunch of plays. But if you have like a trick play or a gadget play, or you have a longer play call, like, you hear the Drew Brees or the Peyton Manning, kind of some of those Twitter or those TikToks, you see them call out, a play that sounds like a paragraph long. Those are wristband plays, right? I remember being in the NFL and being in Jacksonville with Nate Hackett. One of them would be, or even at SC with Kiffin on some of them, or some of these other plays would be, hey, this is the play call this week. And I'd just say wristband. Or Cleveland as well, wristbanded. I'm not going to, that one's going to be tough to call out and memorize.
Wow.
So I'd go
So
straight
you
to the
got to
wristband.
dictate what was on the wristband?
Yeah, well, so normally, so in the NFL, it's all now with the helmet system. If we would have had helmet system with Kiffin, even the way we did it back then, we wouldn't need the wristband anymore. You'd only need the wristband for those long plays, like I just mentioned, because he'd get in the call sheet and go, hey, okay, Cody, you hear me? Gun, double right. Let's go 72 Z drive X out, whatever you want to call. And then we run the play, right? So it's all just in my ear. But before we had the headset system, obviously we would have to signal everything. So all of it was on the wristband. They would signal it. Then in the NFL, you'd have the headset so they could call play. But if it was one of the long ones, I would say, hey, in the middle of the game, just give me a wristband, and they'd go wristband play 5. And that would be one of the longer ones. But then 95% of the plays are not a wristband. So I still have to say we have headsets now. Lincoln Riley's all signal. He's telling the quarterback what to do. The receivers, the running backs, offensive line can look over, get signals. The quarterback can call the play. They don't need to huddle up and do wristbands. But if we want to do, I'm trying to be brief, but I'm also expanding a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of the story behind why certain players wear wristbands in both college and NFL, and why some teams don't.
Jonathan said, do you think we had too many wide receivers in the rotation this past year? And this is something we actually touched on in our Vegas Bowl recap about the success that both Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane had, given that the depth issues were kind of present for that game. Curious your thoughts, Cody, now that you've had more time to think about it.
Yeah, I've said this all season long, and that's something we've talked about on Trojans Live, on the Victory Podcast, on the Trojan Tailgate Show, is who is wide receiver 1, right? Are there, I don't want to say too many, playmakers in one room, which we had at the wide receiver spot, because we had Zachariah Branch, we had Deuce Robinson, we had Jacoby Lane, we had Kyron Hudson, we had Mekhi Lemon, Kyle Ford, had some flashes in some games. So the list went on and on. And, you love to have those games where, we'd always talk about 10 different players touch the football, 12 different players, caught a pass. It's tough for defenses to defend one guy or to defend 12 different guys because they don't know who's going to be the go-to guy this game. But as a quarterback, and I will always stand by this, you have to have your go-to guys. You have to have a 1A, a 1B, a 1 and a 2, right? When I was here at USC, it was Nelson Aguilar and Juju Smith-Schuster. Before that, right, it was Marquise Lee and Nelson Aguilar. It was always kind of someone stepping up. Before that, it was Robert Woods and Marquise Lee, right? So I am a big advocate of as a quarterback, having your go-to guy in crunch time, having a true wide receiver one is more important than having a bunch of good players, right? And we have that at USC. That's one of the blessings of playing quarterback here. You have a lot of options. You have a lot of great players, but it always feels like when you have your most success as an offense through the air, as a passing attack, you have a one option and a two option that are your go-to guys, and you have other guys that can be role players, right? And you look at some of the NFL teams, we've talked about this before, with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, with the Vikings, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins with the Bengals, right? And the list kind of goes on and on with those teams that have those go-to one and two guys or those top two receivers. Now, having a third option, fourth option is important, right, for certain situations, especially if you have injuries or teams are bracketing and taking out one of those guys. But I'm always going to be an advocate of, yes, I like spreading the football around, but when it comes to crunch time, I'm finding where Nelson Aguilar is. I know where 15 is going to be at on the field. I know where Juju Smith-Schuster was going to be on the field because that's my go-to guy. And we saw that in the bowl game when we can focus on just Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane instead of trying to keep everyone happy and spread the football around and get everybody their touches. You get a little bit more explosiveness, and then you have Kyle Ford be that reliable third option that goes and makes a game-winning touchdown catch after Mekhi and Jacoby have put up big-time numbers. It's just, I think that's a lot better recipe for success than it is trying to get everybody the football, right? When you have a crowded wide receiver room. So as much as we're going to miss Deuce and Zachariah, I wish them nothing but the best. I do think it works to our advantage a little bit, just having two premier playmakers and a couple guys around them instead of having, a crowded room where you're trying to feed everybody the football.
We got a question from Chadster who said, what are the transfer portal rules? I've seen so many players go in after it closes. And I'm glad he asked this because this also was something that I was like, wait, did I read it wrong? Like, because I will explain what happened. So there are layers to this, and I took some notes, so I did my research. Thanks, Chadster, for pushing me to do it. So players had until 11:59 local time on December 28th to file paperwork. So that's when I was like, when I saw stuff after that, I was like, what's happening? Here we go. Schools have 48 hours to process the paperwork, which is why you could have seen something announced on the 30th. So that's one reason. Then players involved in postseason play have a 5-day window to enter the transfer portal after their season ends. So that's why you might have seen things after that. But then players impacted by a head coaching change receives a 30-day window to enter the portal. So that's also a reason. And then I didn't know this, Cody, but apparently graduate transfers are not bound to the same transfer windows as underclassmen.
That actually, I mean, I didn't know that either, but that makes sense though. That
Yes.
does make sense because I'm with Chadster on that. I'm glad you explained that too. That gives a little bit more of a definition of all of that. But I'm with him. I would see like, okay, these are the set rules.
And then like things would happen.
There's little side rules and little, okay, there's, disclaimers and all of that. And
Yeah.
oh, by the way, you can do this too. I knew the coach's rule was a thing. I know when a coach leaves, I think that was even before the transfer portal and all that. Whenever you lose a coach, players had the opportunity to look elsewhere. Now, obviously, that kind of carried over the transfer portal, but I'm with Chad's. I'm glad you explained that. But that does make sense because you'd say, okay, window's closed, but so-and-so just announced that they're transferring. Oh, we just got a new transfer, but I thought there was no window until the sprint. So
yeah,
no,
it was confusing.
Okay. Look at you.
And also,
I love that.
Thank you.
On our stuff right
Off-season things I can do.
There we go.
Also, in case anyone was curious, the next transfer portal window is April 16th through the 25th. So kind of end of spring camp.
It's only a 9-day window?
Area. Apparently.
I thought it was okay.
There could be more layers to it that we haven't researched yet. We'll
I mean,
see.
okay. So there's a 9-day window, but then after that, if but then if
you're a younger brother, then you get 2 more days. No, just kidding. Something like that.
But no, that's crazy too. That talks about. I mean, that goes hand in hand with how important recruiting is. If you have a 9-day window, maybe that's a 9-day window for players to enter the portal, and then they have time to look elsewhere. I don't know, whatever it may be, but that how chaotic that has to be. Now for Chad Bowden being a GM to say, okay,
you got to learn everybody.
We need linebacker, corner, running back, whatever it may be. These are our top 5 needs, just like a GM in the NFL. Now you can wait till draft day and free agency and a little bit more. That's agents and all of that. But in college, it is okay. We need these needs. These are the top guys. Go call, get a hold of them. That's got to be absolute chaos. That makes sense though. Why you go get a GM and why we're seeing a lot more in college football. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's good explanation thing. So it's going to be crazy. I mean, that's landscape's changing. It's crazy. It's hard to keep up with, but it gives us a lot more to talk about. So that's a great question. I'm glad Chadster asked that though too, because I'm sure a lot of people were curious about that.
And I'm sure, Chadster, if you want to ask this question in 6 months, I will probably give you a completely different answer.
Yeah.
Who knows with how everything's going.
The NCAA will change the rules in about another year or so. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. We shall see indeed. Okay, a couple more questions. Christopher said, are throwback jerseys from last season, are they a one-time thing or are they here to stay? Which a credit to Christopher, because this is something I hadn't even thought about. I didn't think in the future, but I would assume that like once you rip the Band-Aid off of throwing back throwbacks is what I was gonna say.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, then you can kind of put it in the rotation. I have no idea. I don't have
I've
an answer for you, Christopher. I apologize, but an interesting question.
I don't have an answer, but I have a vote, and my vote is that I think we should wear them again next year. I think that was sweet. I love the homecoming idea to wear them on homecoming, the throwback uh, field and everything too. I think that was awesome. No, is anybody or they'll get kicked out like our chrome helmets did that we wore for a little bit when I was at SC, and then those got X-nayed forever. So we'll see. Maybe they go down that path. But if I'm voting, and we took a poll right now, I am on. Maybe not obviously a lot. I'd like to keep our tradition going on, but I love the throwback, or maybe another throwback, add a little difference to it, or go to a different era. Maybe get the red the cardinal face mask. I think those are pretty sweet too. The Keyshawn days, but we'll see. But I'm a fan of them. I would vote to bring those back again for homecoming next year.
Yeah, I think the difference between the outcry for what you had to wear or not had to wear, what you wore, Cody, was that it was just new, whereas you're referencing the tradition in the past. I think that's how you can kind of wiggle in the newness, if that makes sense. You're still
100%.
like alluding to tradition at some form or fashion. Amy asked, has Pete Carroll talked to the football team at all? Inspirational talks, advice. Now, if you don't know, Pete Carroll is teaching a class. He's co-teaching with two other professors in the Marshall School of Business. As far as I know, Amy, he has not, but I do have a source who works at Marshall who says that it's been really cool. He sat in on the classes and says that Pete is everything. They always say, like, don't meet your heroes. He's like, you can meet Pete. He's someone who, like, lives up to the hype. And I'm sure that you can agree with that, Cody, since you, I believe, were around, you weren't at USC, but recruited by Pete Carroll. Yeah. So I'm sure you have some good Carroll stories to tell.
Oh, I love Pete Carroll. I think he's awesome. They were recruiting me my sophomore year out of high school. This was with Pete Carroll, with Jeremy Bates was the offensive coordinator. Go check too my Instagram. You can find it. There's a throwback picture of me and Pete there. A young high school sophomore Cody Kessler standing next to Pete Carroll. Yeah, it's on the Instagram. So maybe Keely can throw it up on the overlap if we want to give her a little bit more editing work. But yeah, it was cool. I love Pete Carroll, and also huge shout out to Pete Carroll, head coach now for the Las Vegas Raiders. So that's awesome. Surprised me too. I didn't know he was still searching for a head coaching job at the NFL level. Obviously, he still has that itch to go do it. He's one of the best to ever step foot on a football field as a coach. So excited to see what he does for the Raiders. But yeah, it's nothing but great things to say about Pete Carroll. If you ever get the chance to meet him, I'm fully on board with that. He is one of the best, not only just football minds, but just best people to talk to and be around. Just his love for the game and his love for the fans and USC is unbelievable. So like I said, wish him nothing but the best with the Raiders. And I know we're time crunch here. I got to go back. I got my son. I'm ready to go back on my dad duties, and Keely has
dad
a meeting
duty.
But is he? I saw that he's going to stick around. Correct? I don't know if you know any. Have you heard anything about this? Even though he's going to be.
I don't know officially, but apparently he's still going to try to still teach. I don't know. I don't take my word for it.
Unbelievable. I'll say this:
the
if
man
he does,
is crazy, so I feel like he could pull it off.
Yeah, no, 100%. He definitely could do it. But if he does, and you see him around on campus, if you're ever around campus or you see him anywhere, go up and shake his hand, say hi to him. Like he loves that. He loves USC football fans. So yeah, nothing but great things to say about Coach Carroll.
I will say this too. Apparently he is taking the role so seriously, and like, of course he would, but
no doubt.
He knows everybody's name. Like he is just like, I believe that he is the professor you'd hope to have, but it's Pete Carroll. So insane. Talk about, like, you hear the recruiting pitches of like, where else can you get this at a university? This is what they're pointing to. Like, 100%. In what world are you getting Pete Carroll teaching you for a one-time thing as a class? It's just insane. And I'm very jealous of the students, might I add. Also, let me just say, I went to the last post that you have on your Instagram, and it's you and Mark Sanchez. So I could not find the photo that you were referencing.
Then you skipped it. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
No, it's not Instagram time.
It's not Instagram time. You just called me out.
Yes. Oh, I found it. Just kidding. I'm sorry. Here it is. There
you go. Get closer. There you go. Look at that that's a young.
Wow, you are tan.
Yeah, that was a young Cody
You're not in
Kessler.
Bakersfield anymore.
I think I was, I want to say 14 or 15 years old right there.
Oh my gosh.
Next to Pete Carroll. That was when they were heavily recruiting me, and they moved me up to their high-end recruit. Like, it was one of those USC, like, Rising Stars, I think is what they call them.
Oh yeah, the camps. Yeah.
So I was working with the younger kids, and then they had the juniors and the seniors in like the high-end quarterback group. I had a great day that day throwing. Bates came and grabbed me and Carroll, and they brought me over to work with Pete Carroll and the guys that they were recruiting like heavily. and I went out there and had a great showing. So that's kind of got me on the radar for USC. Yeah, that was cool. But I got to work
Wow.
hands on with Pete Carroll. So good. Thank
That's
you for
really
finding it
cool.
too. You just try to make me look like
I
a
don't know
liar
how I
here.
missed it. I know I
almost
I
said
was calling
live.
you out and then totally found it. Okay, we are ending the pod with one final question, and it is from Trojan Mom, or should I say Trojan Grandmom? I don't
Yeah,
know.
there you
What
go.
is she what
Yeah,
is
we
she
got to
going
change.
by these days?
Trojan. She chose Grandma Cece is what she goes
Okay,
by. She
cute.
thinks that'll
Okay,
be easy for Brooks to say when he's a kid. Like it. She's
cute.
Grandma Cece.
Okay, well, for our podcast sake, she's Trojan Mom.
Yeah.
She said, "Hi guys, welcome back. What do you think is our biggest need still, both on offense and defense?"
Ooh, rapid fire. I'm sticking with this, and I always have the trenches. I say need. I say needs. I think depth wise. Obviously, we lost some key players on both sides, offensive line, defensive line. I just want us to continue to go out and get absolute dogs on the defensive line. That dog work mentality with Coach Henderson. Now you have Coach Hansen taking over the offensive line. I think he can build a great group of guys up there. Gets continuity with the starting five. Also build some depth players. So yeah, my answer is, and I think in the Big Ten, as long as we're in the Big Ten, my answer is always going to be prioritize offensive line, defensive line, skill players, everything else. Let that fall in as it will. But yeah, we got to go out and get some dogs up front on both sides of the football.
Alrighty, Cody, that is all I have for questions. Glad to be back. Glad to be podcasting and talking about some recent USC football news. I know I can't end this podcast without throwing it back to you, so take it away.
No, I'm glad to be back too. I am, and if I seem tired a little bit this episode, if I was mumbling or slurring my words, I apologize. I am in the thick of dad duty right now. I'm tired. It was my wife and I, like I said, make a great team. My wife Paige, she's been absolutely amazing. She's the MVP of this family. But yeah, it's for all, and everyone out there who's had a newborn before, they understand where I'm coming from. So a lot of sleepless nights, but just everything kind of stands still when you're in those stressful, sleepless nights. You can't keep your eyes open, but then you look down and you see this cute little beautiful face looking back up at you, and it's just makes everything worthwhile. But yeah, I apologize. I was a little tired this episode. We're trying to squeeze this in. Keely's got a meeting to go to. I'm trying to hurry up. I'm about to go relieve my wife right now so she can go relax, and I'm going to go be on dad duty. I'm going to tag team her out. We're making a great team right now. But love you guys. Fight on. We got a lot more fun episodes coming up this offseason. We're going to do some interview episodes as well. We've had Matt Barkley before. I've already reached out to some other former players, and we're going to have some stories from their days as Trojans. So can't wait for this offseason. Can't wait for spring ball coming up in about a month or so, just over a month. I'm talking
Crazy.
a lot. Fight on. Love you guys. I am out. Back to Keely.
All right, I'll
gonna go
say
be
it
a
for
dad.
you, Cody. You basically had no sleep last night and still wanted to do the podcast. So thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. Still a pro no matter what. But like the man said, that's going to wrap it up. Glad to be back podcasting. We'll be back for another episode soon, so stay tuned. But that's Cody. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.